Today, should you use the Pegan Diet to lose weight and live a healthy lifestyle? Hey, this is Colin DeWay. If you are new here and you want to master your metabolism and get in the best shape of your life, start now by subscribing and click on that bell notification so you don't miss anything. So I had recently heard about this dieting idea called the Pegan Diet. And honestly, I had never heard of it, so I wanted to do a little bit of digging, see what it was all about, and see if it might make sense for you. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm not only going to talk about the positives and negatives of this diet, but also what we should look for in any diet we consume, and take a look at what a Pegan Diet is supposed to be comprised of. If you've been following me for a while, you probably know by now how I feel about most diets with a name, so to speak. However, I don't think any diet is bad per se. I think we just need to look at them and see what the pros and cons are and see if it makes sense for the individual. So after a little bit of digging around, this is what I found out about the Pegan Diet. Basically, it's kind of a cross between the vegan diet and the paleo diet. The major claim of the diet is to help lower blood sugar and optimize health, all while being a little bit less restrictive than the other two diets on their own. So it mostly promotes nutrient-dense whole foods and has a major emphasis around fruits and vegetables. However, you're able to eat a small to moderate amounts of fish, meat, nuts, seeds, and legumes. And things like highly processed sugars, oils, and grains are still discouraged, but are allowed in very small amounts. So sure, it is a little bit less restrictive than, say, a vegan or paleo diet on its own. And the biggest red flag to me on any diet is if it gets overly restrictive. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not against something like a vegan diet, especially if you're doing it for ethical reasons. I'm just not a fan of people who use it as some sort of crash dieting method, which isn't really the point to begin with. And while I'm no vegan, I would guess that most vegans would probably agree with me on that one. Anyway, I'm not really against any diet that you can personally sustain. But here's the thing. Any diet that causes weight loss does so by putting you in a caloric deficit. But there's a reason why very few people who lose weight actually keep it off long term. You start a new diet, you cut out a bunch of foods or even a whole macronutrient like people are doing with this whole keto craze right now. You lose a lot of weight fast, not because the foods that you restricted were bad, but by cutting them out, you cut out a lot of calories. Especially when you start a diet, if you cut out a lot of carbs, you're going to lose a lot of water weight and cause rapid weight loss. However, what often ends up happening, you lose weight, you go back to your old eating habits, and you just gain the weight back, right? Or actually, a lot of times it ends up being worse because you feel so restricted from all those foods that you cut out that you end up completely out of control eating those foods that you had previously deemed off limits. So while this Pegan diet would certainly be a restrictive diet, it's also less restrictive than a normal vegan diet, and for some people who want to live that kind of a lifestyle but not to quite that extreme, it might be a decent option. You'll still be eating primarily whole nutrient-dense foods, but at least you have the option to have some other stuff. And sometimes just being allowed to have something completely changes your mindset. Now keep watching because I'm going to break down how the Pegan diet works soon, but first, something else. Honestly, I think oftentimes people rebel against their diet just because they're told they can't have something. And we always want the thing we can't have, right? Think about it. If I had 4 boxes and I lined them up in front of you and labeled them 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I said, you can have the contents of any one of these boxes, but for the love of God, do not pick number 3. Which box's content are you really going to want to know what's inside? It's going to be number 3, right? Same thing works with your diet. If you just really love ice cream and you tell yourself you can never have ice cream again, what food do you think you're going to be thinking about all the time? Ice cream. So hey, I give a little bit of credit to this diet for being a little bit more flexible. But I think for the majority of people, it's going to be too restrictive to be able to do long term. And the sustainability of your diet is the often overlooked yet extremely important part of your diet. Because the shocking truth is almost nobody loses weight, even though almost everyone loses weight at some point. If you dig through a research paper called The Biology's Response to Dieting, the Impetus for Weight Regain, the stats for successful weight loss are staggering. The reality is about 85% of obese people will lose a significant amount of weight at some point in their life. However, of those people, about 75% of people put all the weight back on in 1 year. Within 2 years, it's about 85%, and 3 years plus, we're looking at 95% of people who lost weight will have put the weight back on again. And I think a big part of this, not the only reason, but a big part, is the way a lot of people diet in unsustainable methods. It doesn't matter what you do to lose the weight if you can't keep doing it after the weight is gone. And this is why I personally like flexible dieting so much. I absolutely support and think that the majority of your diet should be made up of nutrient-dense whole foods. But I also think we need to be able to live our lives and enjoy our diet as well. Like it or not, food and drink will always be a big part of our lives. It's always going to be a big part of holidays and celebrations and get-togethers. And you shouldn't have to choose between not partaking at all or just binging your face off because you're off plan. Hey, I get it. It used to be me. I was there. I did it for a long time. I would either sit there in the corner, not partake in any of the fun, and then judge everybody else for not caring about their bodies and their health. Or I would say, okay, I'm going off plan. I need to get as much food in as I can now because starting tomorrow I'm back on my diet and I'm not going to be able to have it again, so I have to get it in while I can. Comment below if you get what I'm talking about. So there has to be a balance, but there can also be some benefits of some structure and guidelines too. And of course, some people might do a diet like this for more reasons than just weight loss. After all, this is about living a healthy lifestyle, right? One thing they kept coming back to over and over again was promoting lower GI foods to help with blood sugar control, which of course is extremely important for someone like a diabetic. However, for the normal healthy person, it's not such a big deal. And something you have to keep in mind about the glycemic index rating is that it's for foods that are eaten on their own in a fasted state only. Once you eat them in a mixed meal with other things that have more protein and fats and things like that, that almost completely blunts the GI of that food. Honestly, almost making it irrelevant unless you're eating it by itself in a fasted state. So if the Pegan Diet is something that you think you might like and be able to sustain long term, by all means, give it a shot. And if that's you, look into it more, but I will tell you what I did learn from the digging that I did do. So the biggest thing they said right up front is 75% of your intake should be comprised of fruits and vegetables. Honestly, that is a lot. And my biggest concern with that is you're probably going to be dealing with gastrointestinal issues and just feel bloated and not so great all the time. But hey, I'm just telling you what they said, and they're all about low GI foods, so is what it is. Now, obviously, with such a high percentage of your foods coming from fruits and vegetables, your meat intake is going to be much lower than like in a paleo diet, but you can still have some. They prefer you to eat most of your meats from grass-fed, pasture-raised sources of beef, pork, poultry, and whole eggs. They especially encourage eating fish that is lower in mercury content, such as wild salmon. Your fats should come mostly from nuts, seeds, avocados, olive and coconut oils, and omega-3s. They said some whole grains and legumes are allowed, but they pretty strongly discourage it and definitely want you to limit it. But there are some foods that they really want you to stay away from completely, such as dairy, gluten, sugar, processed oils, refined oils, and food additives. So as you can see, it's still pretty dang restrictive and not something that I would typically recommend, but again, I'm all about doing a diet that you enjoy yourself and can stick to. So here's the thing, I want you to see results. I want you to live a happy, healthy life. If you think this Pegan Diet can be a part of that for you, by all means do it. Just make sure you're realistic with yourself about if it's something that you can do for the rest of your life. Now do this next. I want you to click on this video to find out exactly what makes up a calorie deficit to lose weight. Like I mentioned, any diet that causes weight loss does so by creating a calorie deficit. So find out what goes into one and discover how to create one for yourself. If you're new, consider subscribing, and I'll see you over there.